Okay, I'm gonna do this. Do you think I could do this? You think I could do it? I mean, I'm wondering if I can do it. Let me see if I can do this here. Maybe I should turn on some different music, and I can do it. We can do it. Let me show you how I read the paper. New York Times is full of shit. Let me show you something. This is how I read the paper. Now, again, my name is Jonathan Fibonacci. A little background. This is a little political. I try to stay off politics as much as possible. But sometimes I see, now this guy is not Lex Luthor. He's not the nephew. Neel Kashkari. Okay, I cannot. Neel Kashkari. Okay, man, I'm messing his name up. Okay, he's not Lex Luthor. He's not. I think he's the nephew or the half-nephew or second cousin to the nephew. But he's full of shit, and I would like to come talk to him because, see, here we go. This is New York Times, dude, and you know they don't lie. I mean, I think they say their little slogan is they print all the news that's fit to print. This is the New York Times, guys. J.P. Morgan settling another case. See, these big banks, man, what they could do, they can do all kinds of shit because they kind of work for the elite. And so if they get a fine, like, for example, if a J.P. Morgan gets a $2 million fine, it doesn't matter because they just write a check. In fact, they probably wrote a check to Hillary to speak, who put loopholes so that their $2 million penalty is really just 85 cents after. Anyway, so here we go. This is full of shit. Now, I ran a regular mom and pop finance company. I'm going to show you how I read the New York Times. Here you go. Business day. See if I can do this in 5 minutes or less. That's what they say your attention span is. Here we go. You're talking about the power of social media. And that when we start talking to each other, we the people, First Amendment, you know what I mean? Boom. Look at that. It says it's beginning to alter global events. We can do it, guys. First Amendment. Here we go. Now, I ran a finance company for 10 years. It's called mylendingplace.com. And this is how I read the New York Times. So the Fed official offers a way to eliminate mega banks, which is full of shit because you know that the Fed is never going to get rid of the large banks. For example, they're only making them larger. These days, big banks have to raise capital from 13% to 23.5%. Now, if you just use your Oklahoma common sense, if a bank needs more money to stay in existence or to lend, are they going to lend more or are they going to lend less? They're going to lend less, right? Because if you're a bank, if you look like Lex Luthor like that, I don't care if you're, maybe you decided one day you wanted to be, it says here that he even dressed up as a homeless person. It says he's pressuring banks to break apart. Now, that's not true. I'm talking about this Renaud guy out in San Francisco. I probably need to go work for this guy. It says Laplanche leading the lending club. Now, see, here's the thing. This is private lending. Lendingclub.com. That's just peer-to-peer lending. And what happened is it's a great idea. But here's the thing is when you have a Fed system that's built upon Lex Luthor and you decide you want to lend, if you don't have mega bank, boom, the Justice Department will show up and will put you out of business. So here you go. They're hoping, maybe, sort of, kind of, man, wouldn't it be great if we could do some peer-to-peer lending in 2017? Let's ask the big banks. Now, do you think the big banks are going to say, well, we've talked to Lex Luthor, Mr. Renaud Laplanche out there, and, do you think that this guy here, do you think Renaud Laplanche, what's his name? You think this guy who led LendingTree to prominence, do you think that he's going to get the okay from these guys to have peer-to-peer lending that operates outside of this right here? No fucking way. So what's your solution, Fibonacci? I hear that's what you're asking. You're like, are you going to play another song? I might put on some more music, but here's the thing. We have to be honest. When large banks have to have more money, or more liquidity, they're simply going to lend less and have higher fees and run out their competition. Because here's the thing, my little company called mylendingplace.com, we did home loans all over Texas. Now, see, I never got an email from Lex Luthor that said, hey, dude, you have to have 23.5% in a deposit relationship. What happened to me is this regulation from Lex Luthor went to my banks, and my bank said, hey, Fibonacci nigga, if you don't have X amount in liquid money, you're out of business. And overnight, literally overnight, a company that I built for 10 years, mylendingplace.com, was out of business. So what's my solution? Well, my solution is always First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, basically the Bill of Rights. So here you go. Peer-to-peer lending, however form it takes, whether it's through mylendingplace.com, through LendingTree, that is the answer. Because it's simply this. Whenever you have a choice between private money and government money, two things always happens. You, the consumer, have better services, better pricing. Because, for example, if Starbucks, I'm going to use a coffee analogy, if Starbucks had to charge $5 a cup of coffee, but the Steaming Bean in Durango can only charge $2, guess where you're probably going to go get your coffee? You're probably going to go to the Steaming Bean, right? Because why? You have a choice. You can either go to $5 Starbucks guy, or you can go to Steaming Bean. It's as simple as that. As it stands right now with Dodd-Frank, you and I do not have a choice beyond government money. The answer is peer-to-peer lending without this shit. Without this shit. So, for example, let's say that you lived in Denver, Colorado. Let's say you jumped on mylendingplace.com or the Lending Club or whatever, this Renaud guy. Maybe you jump on my site, mylendingplace.com, and I say, hey, you can buy a home with 5% down at 5%, or you can go to your local FDIC bank and you might get a 100% loan, or you may get a 5% loan, but their price or their rate is 8% or 7%. Which one are you going to pick? You're naturally going to pick the lower rate. Most people would. A lower rate, 5% is private money, 7-8% is federal money. As it stands right now, there is no private money because of people like Lex Luthor, who says shit like this, and then right next to him, he's talking about the big banks and their elitism. And for people who don't read this stuff, they're like, well, holy shit, doesn't make sense. If the big banks have to have more money, they're going to charge more to offer that money. And then simultaneously, they're talking about how private money, these guys can't even stay in business. Full of shit. Full of shit. In fact, if you want to see a really good documentary about the Fed, I'll put a link on here. It really talks about the nuances of the Fed and how it really operates almost like its own executive branch. I mean, it can print its own money. Its leaders don't have to be elected. And I mean, it's truly, truly that person who's running the Fed, that person's the real president. And in my opinion, Donald Trump in this election cycle, or not the election cycle, but the new president, Donald Trump's really going to have to go after Dodd-Frank and create an environment for private lending to operate, to serve regular people, to simply have a fucking choice without the fear of the Fed showing up and shutting you down. Because if you lived in a world where every day you were afraid of a criminal subpoena from the Justice Department, are you going to be in business long? No! So whoever's writing this shit, Victoria Finkel, whoever, man, whatever happened to good journalism? Anyway, Fibonacci, I'm bringing it back. Holy shit, this guy pisses me off. If you see this guy, tell him Fibonacci is pissed off at him because he's full of shit, and he's going to use his First Amendment. I'm going to do some of this stuff and say, hey, guys, one of the institutions that we have to dismantle, that we have to really look at, is the banking system, and we have to provide private choices. And when all the choices go back to the FDIC or back to Washington, local Main Street, local regular companies, the banks that serve you and I, not the big banks, the regular banks, the banks of Durango, the banks of these small independent banks. But what pisses me off about these small independent banks, and I'm almost done, is when I've approached the small banks back when I was running my lending place, when I was seeing the writing on the wall, when I was seeing how that they were just getting rid of the small banks and how the FDIC banks and how the large banks, how they were really just creating an environment to get rid of the small banks while fortifying the big banks, the elite banks, I would reach out to these local banks. And I'm like, guys, we are going to have to provide some solution. Do you know how much response I got from small local banks talking about, guys, we're going to have to really, really start, I don't want to use the word revolution, but we're going to have some fucking Trump backbone. Not a single response, not a single email from a local president of a small bank going, hey, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Most small banks are so afraid of the large banks. I'm talking about the small banks, like the regular mom and pop banks that serve your community. Those banks are really just portals or conduits to Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, you know. And as long as we have the big banks, they're going to say to us, let them eat cake. And we're going to see this shit all the time. All the time. Corruption. And the answer is get rid of Dodd-Frank, create loopholes for small local banks to not have to have these liquidity requirements, and give people options. Renaud Laplanche, you better fucking email me. Email me, marcana417@gmail.com. It's going to really piss me off if even this guy here, Renaud Laplanche, holy fuck, I rant for 11, 12 minutes talking about why we need to keep the lending club chief in business. You better email me back, or maybe I'll just start mylendingplace.com, and I'll bring back peer-to-peer local lending. Email me, marcana417@gmail.com, or follow me follow me on Twitter @Fibonacci. You guys be good. Beautiful trees, love them.